Hello everybody and welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty and today's episode is the third part in my Scrapbook Approach series, and we're talking about common photo editing and printing tips. We'll cover lightening and brightening photos, adjusting odd colors, cropping for printing, printing and what print or bleed means, multiple prints on a 4x6, and also a little bit on composition. So let's go ahead and dive in. So I am using Adobe Photoshop Elements 13. This is a much pared down version of Photoshop, and my version 13 is from 2014 really. So it's a 7-year-old program. It cost me about $100, but it has been well worth the investment over the years because it offers plenty of power and flexibility, and I don't have to keep renewing it. There are plenty of other options out there, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Perhaps in the future I'll cover some of that. So let's go ahead and dive into the points of this video and get started with lightening and brightening photos. I give all of my photos a general light boost to them because a lot of print photos tend to show up darker than what you visualize on your screen, and that's just the difference between print colors and light colors. So I always give a general brightness boost. And how I do that is I use this layers panel. Now, if you're not familiar with Photoshop, layers is like having a stack of photos that you can see through the stack, and you can make changes to each photo, and those changes kind of add up to an overall change. And the nice thing about using layers is that if you don't like the changes that you've made, you can go back and readjust them. If we take a step back here for a moment, what I did was hit that icon in my layers menu and I chose a levels adjustment layer. And what that means is it will separately make adjustments to this photo without affecting the photo behind it. So if you slide these little triangles back and forth, you can adjust different brightness factors on this photo. Now, for the most part, I will just use that rightmost little triangle slider to adjust my photo, and I will just slide it until I'm happy with it being brighter than it was before. And then I always am sure to save a separate copy. So go up to your file menu, save as, and give it a new name so that if for any reason you change your mind, you will have the unedited version and this new edited version as a completely separate file to work with. If we do this again with another photo, this photo is actually taken at night. So I go up to my icon and I choose that levels layer, and you can see this little graph that shows up is way different than the last one. That means that this photo is pretty heavy on the dark end. The left side of that graph is kind of the darks in the photo. And so I'm going to lighten and brighten this photo without the photo is taken at night, so I don't want to brighten it so much that we lose the fact that it's taken at night. But I want to brighten it enough so that my daughter here at the fire pit has a better focus to her. Now you can see my little cursor is kind of pointing out the features of the lighting, the reflection of the lights off of the building in the back and the darkness of the night sky. And so I don't want to lose those qualities, like I said. I want to just play with these levers and go ahead, because this is on a separate layer, you can play with all of those levers. And if you don't like it, you can always delete that layer and you'll be back to your starting point. And again, make sure you use that file save as feature so that this photo is saved completely separate from the original photo. And often I will do that at the very beginning of an editing session so I don't forget and accidentally save it over the top of the original. Now I want to talk about adjusting pour colors. So in this photo, my daughter and my husband look kind of orange, and I don't want that. So I am going to create a new adjustment layer, but instead of using that levels feature, I'm going to use the hue and saturation feature. And that's going to allow me to change the colors instead of changing the overall brightness. So whenever you create one of these layers, the adjustment window should pop up for you. And here you can see there's 3 sliders on this one that give you different options. So if you just play with these sliders and go in and try them out and see what the different sliders do. Now you could create layers, like 3 layers, and then on each layer just play with one of the sliders. that is totally an option, and that way that gives you more flexibility to go in and change things. I've been doing this a while, so usually I will just make all these adjustments straight to the photo, but these layers are nice as a newbie to be able to edit without worrying about ruining your photo. So play with those until you can come up with better color. Now you can see here I'm going back and forth between the two. Often when a photo is orange, I will slide the color, or what's called the hue, to a bluer level, and the blue offsets the orange. But if you play with that slider, again, you can see the drastic difference it can make. And then I'll play with the saturation slider a little bit, because if you slide it to the left, it becomes less saturated, and that just kind of removes some of the color, and that can help just take away some of that orangeness to their skin. Now, my family is white, and so I don't have a lot of experience adjusting other skin tones. My understanding is that this should work for any skin tone, but if I'm wrong, do let me know, because I would appreciate that information and knowledge. And again, go in and save a separate copy of this photo so that you have your untouched original to work with should anything go wrong. And while I am showing you the video of me messing around with saving that, I would also like to say sometimes your photos are too blue, especially under newer LED lights and such. So what I said about orange is going to hold true for blue photos as well. You're just going to slide the sliders the other direction. So instead of the hue slider going towards the blue side, you're going to take that hue slider and go towards the reddish orange side, and just play with it until you get the color that you like. Now I'd like to talk about especially phone cameras and print ratios. Now, when you take a photo on your phone, which a lot of us do these days, the ratio of the photo isn't going to be exactly a 4:6 print. In fact, when I open the information for this photo, you can see that it's over 42 inches big. And so there are adjustments that we should make to our photos before we send them off to a printer, no matter what you do. Now, if I were to try and print this, and I do print my photos from home, and you can see when I pull up the print information, right away you can see that the photo is just too big to fit on a print size. And so even if I change the photo print size, you can see that there's this white space at the top and the bottom, and that's because the software is trying to fit the entire data of the photo onto that 4:6 print. And because our cameras do not take the photos in that shape, we're gonna have to adjust that a little bit. So I always crop my photos to be exactly 4:6 inches before I send them to any printer, if I'm sending them to a print service or if I'm printing them here at home, because then you know you will print exactly what you see in this crop. So I'm going to hit that little crop icon on the left, and down here at the bottom I am going to have some options about what size I want to crop my photo to. And you can see that little box shows up, and part of my photo is off the edge, and again that's because our phones do not take the same size as a print. And so I'm going to slide this box around until the photo is within that box, and I will know that is exactly what I will get when I print this out. And I will go ahead and save a copy of this, just like I did with all the other photos, so that I will be able to send this off to whatever print service that I use. After I'm done with the crop, I go in and double check my photo information, and sure enough, it is 4:6. And it's really important that when you're printing a photo that the resolution box is a number that's greater than 300. And that is a much bigger topic than we have time for today. If you have any questions on that, please do let me know. So let's move on into printer bleed. So printer bleed, well, it sounds scary. What that means is that the printer will kind of stretch your photo ever so slightly so that the ink kind of bleeds off the edge of the photo. Now that comes into play that if you have cropped your photo with like somebody's face really close to the edge, that might end up bleeding off the edge. So when you crop your photos, keep those photos down a little bit smaller. Now here I'm showing you, this is a 4:6 print, and there's a light gray area and a dark gray area. And I have set this up whereas those little white strips on either end are actually the room for the photo to bleed. And this is set up specifically for my printer, but this this is probably similar to what you would get at any print service. Now, this is 2 photos printed on the same 4x6 paper, and we'll get a little bit more to how to do that in a minute. But what I wanted to show you there is that those white edges are actually going to be printed once they come out of the printer because of that bleed. So know that for cropping and for if you want to fit multiple photos on a print, then you need to know about print bleed. And that leads us directly into printing multiple prints on a single 4x6 sheet. Now, pocket page scrapbookers, traveler notebook scrapbookers, bullet journal, those kind of memory keepers know about needing smaller size photos, but as a 12x12 scrapbooker, these sizes can feel inconvenient or possibly even a little daunting, and I'm hoping I can make that just a little bit easier for you. I've been changing the size of my photos for years, and in fact I have these kind of template files that I've created over the years and saved, and I will open up a template file and go ahead and drop photos into these templates, which will keep them to the sizes that I want and use the most often. So here I've got 4 photos on a 4x6 print. And notice they have nice wide borders around them, and that does a couple of things. I print this without that bleed happening, and so I'm getting true print sizes that way. And that is necessary to have that big border if you want to print without the bleed. I'm going to quickly show you how to drop in photos, and if you could see me, I'm doing air quotes, drop in photos into this file. I copy and paste the photo from my original document onto the top of this file, and at first you saw it was very large and looked weird, but then I go use that layers panel and click on that photo layer and choose the drop down menu that says create clipping mask, and I have a much more detailed version of this in another video, which I will link up above and also in the show notes. But know that this is a tool that you can use to limit your photo to the size of these black boxes. Now those boxes could be any color really, I just use black. And you can then resize your photo by dragging on the little corner handles of this photo to make it bigger or smaller. And I tend to make the people fill, because it is a small photo, I want those people to fill the entirety of that black box or that photo. And again, if you want more details on doing this, I do have that separate video for you, so go check that out. So I will go through all my photos and I will fill in all these boxes, and then I've got 4 photos that I can print in the space that one 4x6 photo would take, especially on my 12x12 layouts. I love to do this so that I can fit lots and lots of photos. So what do you think I'm going to say about this? Save yourself a copy. Do save yourself a copy. And so I will name my photo, and here's another tip that I use. If I were making this photo and I needed to print it more than once because I have multiple kids, sometimes I will do that and put the same exact photos in separate albums. I will make a little note in the file name, and at the end of the file name I will put an X and a number. So that means ×2, ×3, whatever number I need. And that way when I'm ready to send these to the printer, I know exactly how many copies I need. So that's just a little tip for you that I use, and hopefully it can help you out too. Let's very briefly talk about composition. Now, when I was cropping those photos down, and here's another example of me cropping, I've got that little box that I can drag around. Now, I tend to use the grid lines that show up in that box. That's called the rule of thirds grid lines. And I will place the face or the focal point of the image on one of those lines, preferably as close to the intersection of those lines as I can get. Now I wanted to make sure I got her hands as well as her face in this photo, so I couldn't quite get her face on the intersection, but I got it as close as I could. And notice that I put her face to the right of the photo because she's kind of looking off to the left. If I had done it the other way, well, now it wouldn't even fit on my photo, but that creates awkwardness where she's kind of looking off the edge of the photo. So another reason why you want to edit your photos is that you can change this composition. If you took a photo that's kind of awkward to begin with, you can hopefully adjust your crop so that you have a better composition and flow to your photos, and go ahead and save it. That was the final tip for this episode. I know we went through these tips pretty quickly, and if you're brand new to this kind of editing software, it might be a little overwhelming. Do ask me questions. I'd be totally happy to answer them for you. And if you need more details, I could even possibly create a new detailed video on specific questions. I'd be happy to do that. And I would like to, in the future, talk about some free or inexpensive photo editing software because those tools have been way more powerful in the last few years than ever before. And I am starting to use them more and more, but I've been doing this process for so many years that this is my go-to process. Thank you very much for joining me today. If you would like to know more about my whole entire scrapbooking approach, I have the first two videos in this series talking about how I take my photos, how I organize and back up my photos, and in the future I'll be back with more episodes about how once my photos are printed, I organize them into stories for getting ready to scrapbook. So I hope you will join me next time.